But today, the New York Times Magazine published this behind-the-scenes expose by Robert Draper and Luke Broadwater. It details how the January 6th committee was able to pull off an historic investigation and how the panel's 9 members were able to present their findings to the public in a way that captured the magnitude of their discoveries. Let's go to Robert Draper right now before I lose my voice entirely. Robert, can you talk to me about the role Kevin McCarthy played in all of this in terms of ultimately shaping the outcome of the committee?
No, I mean, interesting question, Alex, because I think that unwittingly Kevin McCarthy really gave an advantage to the committee by making the decision after Nancy Pelosi pushed the veto button on 2 of his 5 picks to be on the committee, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, that McCarthy responded somewhat petulantly by then pulling the other 3. What this meant was that Trump had no defenders on the committee and that there was no kind of circus. You know, there was no external fighting amongst committee members, and it allowed them, therefore, to set their own narrative, to actually engage in a series of productions, which the hearings very much were, without any kind of interference. And so McCarthy did the committee a favor, which I'm quite certain he didn't intend to do.
I'm sure he didn't intend on doing that either. The other person, the other Republican who effectively shaped the outcome of this committee was Liz Cheney. I mean, you detail in exhaustive specificity the ways in which she kind of at every turn steers this committee into a different place, but beginning with, and this is not just as someone in television, a part of it that has been wildly underreported, beginning with understanding the importance of the televised aspect to all of this. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, yes. Cheney was really the first person on the committee to recognize the necessity, not just the virtue, but the necessity of having high production values brought to this committee. Because in her view, Cheney's view, failure simply wasn't an option with this committee. As a Republican, she knew that members of her own party were gunning for it. She knew that tens of millions of people wanted it to fail, that there was a right-wing media ecosystem that would portray it as such. And so they wanted to reach as many viewers as possible. And that was why Cheney was a real proponent of the former ABC news president and producer James Goldston of coming over and actually doing the production of these. And she and Goldston didn't always see eye to eye, and Cheney didn't see eye to eye with a lot of the other folks on the committee, too. But it certainly was her view that that it was important to lay out a case, to do it in a way that was narratively dramatic and thus appealing to a larger audience.
And Goldston walks in there and is like, where's the control room? And members of Congress are like, what control room? I mean, they're really starting from like scratch when it comes to this actual production project, if you will. Can you describe the evolution of that and how they basically staffed it up?
Yeah, Goldston was brought in at the beginning of May, just 1 month before the committee was to begin its hearings. And this is a guy who's used to running a newsroom of a couple thousand people and was told by the committee staff, no, we actually don't have any staff for you, but we don't think we'll need it. You know, we're used to doing televised hearings before. And Goldston recognized, along with Cheney, how important it was to do this in a way that would be sophisticated and would appeal to a wide viewership. So that initial meeting that he had with the staff ended on a very, very pessimistic note, but Chairman Benny Thompson and Vice Chair Liz Cheney got wind of his consternation and helped see to it that he got the production staff that he wanted, which was still very shoestring and still with only 1 month to spare. And I do have to emphasize, Alex, that as seamless as these productions, as these hearings appeared to be, they were always a photo finish. They always required 20-hour days, stuff being rewritten at the very, very last minute, all sorts of glitches that we ourselves, the viewers, didn't see. But, you know, there was a real don't try this at home, kids quality to the entire production.
Well, certainly. I mean, the other way in which Cheney was so instrumental was in recruiting some of the most explosive witnesses that were brought before the committee and before the American public. And I'm thinking first on that list is Cassidy Hutchinson. It sounds like Cheney effectively brought Cassidy to her office, brought Hutchinson into like the inner sanctum, if you will, of the committee and walked her, if you will, to the witness seat, which is to say the public witness seat. Can you talk a little bit more about that relationship and how meaningful it was to have the daughter of Dick Cheney be the one to convince you that this was the right thing to do for American democracy?
Sure. Yeah, you have to remember, Alex, that for so many of these witnesses, overwhelmingly Republican, I mean, only a couple of them were not Republican, the idea of testifying before a predominantly Democratic committee sounded like the kiss of death, sounded like they, was bringing on a world of hurt for them. It was Liz Cheney who brought a level of comfort, a level of familiarity, a common language to the proceedings when it came to people like Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers, but I think particularly a lot of the women who were Republican women who wanted to testify. And you mentioned Cassidy Hutchinson, who is certainly, first among equals when it comes to that. Hutchinson was still had one foot in Trump world, even though she and her boss, former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, had a falling out. And she was certainly aware of what the likely repercussions would be if she were to say everything that she knew. And indeed, as the story makes clear, and as readers also recognize from taking a look at the Cassidy Hutchinson's depositions that were recently released, this was a work in progress. She had one attorney, a guy, Stefan Passantino, who's from Trump world, and she felt very, very at pains to be forthcoming to the committee. And it was really only over a period of time, as she developed both a increasing discomfort with her own legal team and an increasing comfort with Cheney, that she switched lawyers and then really began to tell all. And that was in a particular deposition that immediately compelled Cheney to talk to Chairman Benny Thompson and then turn to the other members and say, we've got to have this young woman on in a standalone hearing right away.
And they didn't, because of security concerns for Cassidy Hutchinson, they didn't tell other members what was happening until basically the 11th hour. Is that right?
That's exactly right. They literally were told, the members were, that, hey, we're about to have we're going to have a special hearing. We need you all in Washington in the next couple of days. When you do arrive, you're to report to the secure compartmented intelligence facility, the SCIF, a secure room where they could discuss classified information. And it was only then, literally 3 hours before the hearing was to begin, that they were told, the other members were, that Cassidy Hutchinson had all this bombshell testimony, which they then gave excerpted summaries of to the committee, and the committee could then see for themselves that indeed what she had to say was explosive. It still was not thoroughly agreed upon at that moment in time that Hutchinson should bear the burden of telling all this explosive stuff without corroboration, but the die was pretty much cast, and so the rest is history.
Robert, one more question for you as we talk about Liz Cheney and her outsized role in all of this. You note that she maintained a Captain Ahab-like focus on Donald Trump as a singular threat to democracy. But some of that focus made other committee members nervous because they weren't sure where her service to democracy began or ended and where her own political aspirations began. And I wonder if you have any insight into all of that and how much of this is about, capital D democracy and how much of this is about someone who believes they should be the next nominee or at least challenge Trump on the Republican ticket.
Sure. I mean, that question was an obvious one, both for other members and for staffers, given the fact that Liz Cheney, just a couple of months before she joined the committee, had refused to rule out the possibility that Liz Cheney, might run for president in 2024. So it did beg the question to a lot of people, what are her motives? And are we servicing her political ambitions, or is she servicing us? Now, my own view, and I think the facts really bear this out, is that what Cheney did in service to on the committee committee came at a very, very significant political cost. And it's hard, frankly, for me to imagine just what a political pathway would be for her, given all that's transpired. But yes, there was real concern at the time. I do think that you know, and Adam Kinzinger is quoted in the story. I'd interviewed him about this, saying, look, you know, I had some frustrations with Liz Cheney, but I also think that the committee would have failed without her, that she, far more than anyone else, is responsible for the committee's success.
I loved this reporting, Robert. I love the parts, like the little details about Nancy Pelosi silently offering people chocolates and then listening to what was going on, the sort of the unspoken Svengali behind this entire operation. It's riveting journalism. It's coming at the perfect time as we're looking at the, you know, the final report from the committee, a new tranche of transcripts that just came out in time for Christmas. Robert Draper, thanks for your time. Thanks for your reporting. Staff writer for the New York Times. Great to see you.
Great seeing you. Happy holidays.